Hello, I'm Esther Giduyuat. It's Friday, February 4th. This is Africa 54.
Ethiopia's holy town of Lalibela struggles to recover from conflict. Sudanese resistance committees take center stage in the fight against military rule. And a closer look at a music artist from Sierra Leone whose new beats are taking the country by storm.
Ethiopia's Lalibela once hosted pilgrims visiting the town's famous rock churches, but today, having changed hands several times in the Tigray conflict, the town and its residents are struggling to heal. David Oyo has more.
Broken glass on the stairs and blood on the walls. This is the Cliff Edge Hotel, a place where pilgrims once rested while visiting Ethiopia's Lalibela. But the holy town and its shell-shocked residents are now struggling to recover. Lalibela, whose rock churches are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, has changed hands several times in a war between fighters from the northern Tigray region and government forces and their allies. The head of Lalibela's Industry and Investment Bureau says more than 20 hotels were looted and destroyed. Melek Alabel manages the Cliff Edge Hotel. He says remembering the past glory and seeing the rubble today makes him wish he'd never known what it was once like. I can't describe the feeling with words, he says. War broke out between the federal military and forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front in November 2020. Lalibela, located in Amhara close to Tigray's southern border, was first captured by the Tigrayans on August the 5th. The military and its allies retook the town at the start of December, only for Tigrayan forces to recapture it briefly on December the 12th before being pushed out again. The once prosperous town now lacks electricity. And it's not just buildings that carry the scars of war. Turungo Ambai says her daughter was raped and killed by a drunken Tigrayan fighter who burst into her home in December.
After he killed her, he left the scene immediately. It was right on the exit of this farm. I was looking for an elderly man who would beg him for me to return her to me. When we arrived at the scene, we found her lying on the ground. I rushed to her and held her up, but she was already gone. I laid her back on the ground and cried.
Police confirmed the death had been reported. Tigrayan forces could not be reached for comment. Getachew Reda, spokesman for the TPLF, has previously denied the targeting of civilians in areas under its control and has said that rape allegations would be taken very seriously.
David Doe of Reuters filed that report. Moroccan rescue workers on Friday are closer to reaching a 5-year-old boy trapped at the bottom of a well in a delicate operation to dig out large parts of a hillside where there is a risk of landslide near the northern city of Chefchaouen. The boy's father says he had been repairing the 32-meter well near his home Tuesday when his son fell in, according to local media reports. First responders confirmed the boy named Ryan is still alive by lowering a video camera down the well's narrow shaft. The MAP news agency says rescuers are able to send him oxygen and water through pipes. The well's shaft is too narrow for rescuers to reach the bottom and the soil too loose to risk widening it. Heavy construction equipment is on the scene, digging a parallel hole in an effort to reach the boy. Rescuers are currently about 6 meters from the child, according to state media reports. The group that led protests in the uprising that toppled Sudan's former president Omar al-Bashir on Friday said it was refusing to meet with Volker Perthes, the UN Special Representative to Sudan. In a statement on Twitter, the Sudanese Professionals Association also accused the United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, which Perthes also heads, of failing to condemn Sudan's October 25th coup and siding with military leaders. Resistance committees are at the heart of major demonstrations against October's military coup in Sudan, but now they are also drafting a charter, hoping to create a political movement with broad appeal. Vincent Makori has more.
The dressing on Ahmed Ismat's cheek covers a wound caused by a tear gas canister. He is a spokesperson for Sudan's so-called Resistance Committee. They came to prominence in the uprising that ousted Omar al-Bashir 3 years ago. An October 25th military coup has propelled them back to the front lines. But behind the scenes, they are also drafting a charter. The aim? To turn grassroots activism into a political movement with broad appeal.
The Resistance Committee Charter will represent the bare minimum of our demands and the basic structure of what we want the state to implement. But it will be a very detailed document.
But some see the Resistance Committee as youthful idealists lacking the political presence or cohesion to achieve their aims. Former Cabinet Minister Khalid Omar Youssef said they are grassroots movements with no close coordination among them across Sudan. He believes political parties and the committees should form a broad front against the coup. The committees complained that after Bashir was overthrown, the parties tried to marginalize them. In a sign of growing political engagement, they have met with U.S. diplomats and officials from the United Nations. U.S. Senator Chris Coons said on Tuesday he had nominated the resistance committees and a group of medics aligned with the protest movement for the Nobel Prize. As for the military, it says without commenting directly on the committees, that civilian groups in general should support national consensus and reconciliation. The committees reject negotiation with the military. The demonstrations they have organized have drawn hundreds of thousands onto the streets. It's a campaign fraught with physical risk. Medics say security crackdown has left at least 79 people dead. But committee members like Azza Sarkati argued that the streets have rejected political parties as well as the military. The responsibility is fully on our shoulders, she says. We have to steer the country to safe shores. Vincent Makori, Washington.
The African Union holds its annual Heads of State meeting in Ethiopia on Saturday and Sunday. Issues on the agenda are likely to include the conflict in Ethiopia, the restoration of constitutional rule following coups in Sudan, Mali, and Guinea, and the continent's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. On Wednesday and Thursday, the Executive Council of African Union convened in Addis Ababa and passed a resolution for the expedited activation of the Regional Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC Africa. Transitioning is not currently illegal in Ghana, but it will be if anti-LGBT plus bill is passed into law. Activist and artist Va-Bene Elikem Fiatsi is fighting what she describes as anti-human legislation. Lorraine Anthony has the details.
In a dimly lit room in southern Ghana, transgender activist Va-Bene Elikem Fiatsi carries out her daily rituals, the rites that form part of her transition to womanhood.
Coming out, the first thing is to come out yourself first. And when you feel safe with yourself, is the beginning of a new journey. Very colorful and also
her journey is not currently illegal in Ghana, but it will be if a new law is passed. The so-called Family Values Bill intends to tighten already strict anti-LGBT plus regulations that criminalise same-sex relations. It would see jail terms of up to 10 years for advocacy of LGBT+ causes and 3 to 5 years for those who hold out as lesbian, gay, non-binary, transgender and transsexual. The same punishment would be imposed for those who undergo or perform surgical procedures for gender reassignment.
I don't even call that bill Ghanaian Family Value Bill. I just call it anti-human bill because it has nothing to offer family value. It is totally unnecessary and misplaced priority because it proposes nothing that is of family value to Ghana, but rather it is taken away from our family values of being a tolerant country and being hospitable and loving, and it breaks the unity of this country.
The bill also includes a provision that would force some to undergo conversion therapy. Amnesty International said this could violate Ghana's anti-torture laws. Nevertheless, the bill has broad backing among lawmakers. No politician has come out publicly against it. And President Nana Akufo-Addo, though urging civil debate and tolerance, has not taken a stance. Its backers say LGBT+ activities threaten the concept of family in a country where homophobia is pervasive. Fiatsi, who runs an artist residence in Ghana's second city, Kumasi, says some members of her family and friends haven't spoken to her in 5 years.
Most of them think I'm just a demon.
But Fiatsi also takes comfort in small acts of humanity. Shortly after the bill was introduced, she travelled to her family's village for a funeral, her first time back in 20 years. Standing nervously in her dress and heels, some people exchanged pleasantries, while others darted their eyes and quietly sniggered. But before too long, the awkwardness gave way to familial warmth. Pats on the back, questions about how her life was going, and when someone made a snide comment, she stuck out her tongue.
For me, one, it's important for me to come to this funeral, to pay homage to my loved one, and also to say, to wish farewell. But another thing is to understand the relationship that is going to be developed after here, and how people are going to respond to me, how they are going to welcome me, how they are going to accept me.
More than 70% of Ghana's 30 million population are Christian. Fiatsi herself is a former pastor. Christian leaders are among the most outspoken in support of the bill.
Before anything, before gender, before nationality, before ethnicity, before the religions, one thing that matters most is human.
There have been no national opinion polls on the bill and no voting date has been set.
Yeah, like that boss, if you're out.
Fiatsi describes feeling like she's waiting to be slaughtered. To say I am afraid is an understatement, she says, but I am what I am.
Lauren Anthony of Reuters filed that report. UN and international aid agencies are making preparations to assist thousands of people in Madagascar ahead of a powerful cyclone that's expected to make landfall on the east coast Saturday, just 2 weeks after Tropical Storm Anna struck. Aid agencies expect the impact of Basirai to be more devastating. They say about 4.4 million people are at risk across 14 districts in Madagascar. They expect around 600,000 people to be directly affected by the storm, including more than 150,000 who are likely to be displaced. Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a song in Sierra Leone takes the country by storm. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
The leader of the Islamic State terror group died Thursday during a raid by U.S. Special Operations Forces in northwestern Syria. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb has more on the operation that eliminated Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi, who reportedly blew up himself and his family to avoid capture.
Islamic State leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi taken out Thursday at his house in northwest Syria, as President Joe Biden watched the daring operation from the White House.
Knowing that this terrorist had chosen to surround himself with families, including children, we made a choice to pursue a special forces raid at a much greater risk than to our own people, rather than targeting him with an airstrike. We made this choice to minimize civilian casualties.
U.S. officials say troops called out for civilians to get out of the building, safely removing a couple and their 4 children from the first floor before an explosion ripped through the walls of the top floor.
In a final act of desperate cowardness, he, with no regard to the lives of his own family or others in the building, he chose to blow himself up, not just to the vest, but to blow up that 3rd floor, rather than face justice for the crimes he has committed.
The blast was so powerful, the military says bodies flew out of the building. Fingerprints and DNA analysis showed Qureshi died along with his wife and 2 children. But the danger didn't end there.
2 barricaded combatants hiding among children began firing at U.S. forces. In this engagement, 1 child was found dead along with the 2 combatants. The 2 combatants, 1 male and 1 female. After neutralizing this threat, U.S. forces saved 4 additional children, including an infant child on the 2nd floor.
McKenzie said the mission ended as armed fighters associated with al-Qaeda started moving in. No American troops were killed or wounded. But the Pentagon says a mechanical failure on one of the helicopters forced troops to land it away from the site and blow it up to prevent enemy access to it. Known by several names, Qureshi led Islamic State for more than 2 years and is reported to have orchestrated the Hasakah prison attack last month. He was in charge when Islamic State's Afghan affiliate carried out the deadly Kabul airport attack last year, and prior to his leadership was also a driving force behind the enslavement, rape, and murder of countless Yazidis in Iraq.
He was a hands-on kind of leader. This is a man that we should all be happy is no longer walking on the face of the earth.
U.S. officials called his death a significant blow to the terror group. Carla Babb, VOA News, the Pentagon.
Following public outrage, Botswana's government is revising a controversial spy bill on Friday, which allowed investigators to intercept private communications without a court order. Under the revised bill, tapping private conversations now becomes an offense. The initial bill allowed investigators to bug communication devices and gave state agents immunity from prosecution. The revised bill is expected to pass into law with few changes. The most recent COVID-19 cases in China are adding stress to an already strained supply chain, causing delays in the shipping of everyday items to the United States. VOA's Elizabeth Lee shows what one business is doing to alleviate the problem.
Young Schultz imports clothing and other goods from China that eventually end up at U.S. department stores. Before the pandemic, it took 3 weeks for her products to travel from China to her warehouse in Southern California. But now she says it takes an additional 45 days at least.
Yesterday, I just received an email. We have 5 containers supposed to sailing on January 22nd. However, they say, sorry, it will be February 1st.
Supply chain experts say the delays will continue to be unpredictable, in large part because Omicron and Delta strains of the coronavirus have been detected in many Chinese provinces, including port cities. That, combined with China's zero-COVID strategy of lockdowns and mass testing, are causing ripple effects in the global supply chain.
So before Omicron, and before the latest lockdowns and partial lockdowns in China, global supply chains were already stressed and have been stressed for a couple of years. But this latest round of events there in China and Chinese ports has just added to what is already a very difficult situation.
And if one Chinese port closes, driving to another port isn't so simple.
In China, especially a bigger city, they don't welcome another city's resident to arrive because they believe if from outside, the risk is too high, so they do a quarantine 14 days minimum.
Even when the container ships arrive in the U.S., there are more delays.
There's a container shortage, but we also have shortage of workers here in warehouses, in trucking.
There is also a financial cost to the delays. For example, a container that used to cost $3,000 to $4,000 to ship is now more than $20,000. The Port of Los Angeles hasn't seen an impact from China's latest COVID cases, but
we are expecting a slowdown in February from China and other Pacific Rim countries because of the Lunar New Year. Whether the Omicron kicks that even further, we'll just have to wait and see.
Analysts say dependence on China for manufacturing has exacerbated the supply chain problem.
Companies are realizing, hey, what's now 2 years later, if I had taken action 2 years ago and looked at alternate sources of supply, maybe I would have been in a better position.
Don DiCostanzo, CEO of Pettigo Electric Bikes, did just that. At the time, he looked to diversify where his bikes were made because of the tariffs for frames made in China, never expecting a pandemic would hit.
The current crisis right now we've mitigated by having steady flow of shipments coming from Vietnam, China, and Taiwan. They seem to have shutdowns at different points in time.
We rented all these extra containers.
DiCostanzo is also keeping 4 months of inventory instead of 2. Amid the uncertainty over what COVID-19 will bring next, experts agree that 2022 will continue to bring supply chain disruptions and higher costs for consumers. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
There was heartache in Yaoundé Thursday evening as Afghan hosts Cameroon were defeated by Egypt in a semi-final that was decided on penalties. Clara Frank has more.
Tournament host Cameroon are out of the Africa Cup of Nations after a tense semi-final against Egypt was decided on penalties. For fans of the indomitable Lions, it was a moment of heartache. And for some like Alphonse Chifor, watching the game in Yaoundé, also anger at their Portuguese coach, Tony Conceição.
When I see what Aliou Cissé is doing in Senegal, when I see that the coach of Burkina Faso is Burkinabe, I regret to note that we trust useless Western coaches, because the defeat of Cameroon at the moment is totally the responsibility of the coach who did not understand what to do.
Another supporter, Joseph Banga, even called for Conceição to be jailed before returning to his home country. Conceição himself admitted that his squad ran out of steam. The match had provided few highlights and was goalless at the end of extra time. Cameroon then converted only 1 of 4 penalties. 2 were saved in spectacular fashion by Egypt's keeper Mohamed Abou Gabal. His teammates converted all 3 of their spot kicks. The defeat is no doubt a major blow for Cameroon, who had been seeking to become the first host nation to lift the trophy since 2006. Their tournament has also been overshadowed by a stadium crush that led to 8 deaths last week. Thursday's match was the first game back at Olembe since the tragedy. Egypt will return to the stadium on Sunday for the fight against Senegal. Clara Frank, Washington.
One song and music clip from Freetown, Sierra Leone is taking the country by storm. VOA Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell joins its creator, Drizzy Lick, to find out more.
Back then when we start, nobody no understand.
Drizzy Lick, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. How are you?
Fine. I know you're a very popular performer right now. You've got a lot of hits out, but I wanted to talk to you about the one that you have a music video for called Exodus. Before we start, though, what is your birth name?
My birth name is Benjamin Menelik George.
So how did you get the name Drizzlick?
Growing up, my friends used to call me Drizz because one of my favorite artists is Drake, and he's Drizzy, so they called me Drizz. So it's a mix of my favorite artist name and my middle name.
The music video, it starts right out with a newspaper article on corruption, and the whole video seems to be about Exodus. So can you explain?
The song was inspired by, firstly, it was inspired by the community. The people of Sierra Leone have been stuck in one place for a very long time, in my opinion. And most times, people blame it on corruption and all these other things. I feel like as a people, it's time for us to decide to move past things like that because we have a role to play.
I'm seeing you in this white mask, like a hoodie and white shoes with their boots. What's going on there?
In the video, we're trying to juxtapose the look of a villain and the look of a saint. I'm basically trying to say the movement of God's people is not only for the saved, it's for everyone. It's always been about the people making the music and the environments they represent. So that's what actually builds my interest in social issues.
Have you had the opportunity to collaborate with international artists?
I have collaborated with Mastercraft. He's a Nigerian producer. He actually produced Exodus. Big Zoo. He's a Sierra Leonean, but he's based in the UK. I've also worked with Ghanaian producers from all around.
Getting a lot of attention on YouTube anyway, over 50,000 views. How otherwise are people responding to the songs?
It's currently the #1 song in Sierra Leone, which I'm proud of. Yeah.
And finally, it's part of an album that you are about to produce or about to release, or what's the status there?
Yeah, so I'm working on my sophomore album titled Ashobi, and Exodus is one of the singles.
When can people expect to listen to that album if they want to?
Sometime next year, early next year.
All right, Drizzlick, thank you so much for joining me today. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather and Drizzlick. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.